Oh, so we are live, and I really want to give my reaction to Trump and the Iran deal and everything. So I'm just gonna really what's gonna happen in this live stream. I'm just gonna say my opinion for a bit and really just talk about how I feel about it, and then maybe if there's questions, if people come on and stuff, and I'll talk about that. So basically, BBC reporting today that US President Donald Trump says he will withdraw for the US from an Obama era nuclear agreement with Iran, calling it a decay and a rotten deal, and he said it was an embarrassment to him as a citizen going against the advice from European allies. In response, Iran said that it was preparing to restart its uranium enrichment, and which was key for making nuclear weapons. And Rouhani said the US has announced it doesn't respect its commitments. I have ordered the Atomic Energy Organization of Iran to be ready for action if necessary, so we can resume our enrichment on an industrial level without any limitations. So basically, Trump has got rid of this deal for I don't really know why, because this is the one way you can look at it. So John Bolton and Mike Pompeo, neoconservatives, have come into the administration, and what do neoconservatives want the most? They want their ideology and their worldview spread across the world, and that's what we saw with the Bush administration. That's what we saw with George Bush invading Iraq, and he wanted to invade Iran next. This has been a dream for conservatives for ages. So what he wants to do is to make the situation where he can invade Iran, basically, which would be a disaster, and I'll get onto that in a sec. But basically, this also comes out of a hatred of Obama because he tweeted or he said that he could make another deal with Iran, which makes no sense. This deal was absolutely fine. Why would you want to get rid of a deal that stops Iran from getting nuclear weapons, which is approved by the UK, France, Russia, and I think it's China as well? So why would you want to get rid of that? It's just absolutely ridiculous. And our history, including the UK as well, our history of fucking over Iran is long. So I'm going to lay it down for you quick. So it was exploited in the colonial period and everything, and they did set up their own constitution and parliament in the 1900s, like 1907, I think it is. But basically, during World War Two, the US overthrew their king because he was sympathetic to the Nazis, and we installed the Shah, the last Shah of Iran, and he would be in bed with the US, and then eventually the US would help him overthrow the democratically elected government in 1953. You probably all heard about Mohammad Mossadegh. Bernie Sanders goes on about him a lot. So they overthrew him and installed the Shah as an absolute monarch, and they helped him create his secret police, the Savak, who were brutal, repressed everyone, did loads of mass executions, and this created the situation for Ayatollah Khomeini to rise up as the new leader of Iran. So basically, there's lots of protests, Marxist groups, student groups, Islamist groups, everything. But eventually, the Ayatollah, he'd become the Ayatollah, the cleric at the time, Ruhollah Khomeini, basically came to prominence for being the first one to criticize the Shah. He comes in, overthrowing the other Shah, or Reza Shah. He flees to the United States. And yeah, that's Iran. And then what do we do to Iran after it becomes independent from the West and after it becomes an Islamic Republic? Well, basically, Saddam Hussein invades Iran and he uses chemical weapons. And guess who helps him? The US and France and Saudi Arabia. So there's all this outrage about Assad using chemical weapons. Remember who we helped use chemical weapons in the first place? Saddam Hussein. And then Iran fought him for 8 years, and he used chemical weapons on civilians multiple times. And Iran has survived since then with numerous sanctions, and they have their alliances really are with North Korea, Russia, and China, are the main alliances they have because everyone else fucking hates them thanks to what the US and UK have done. We've isolated them. And then Obama, John Kerry get this. I guess it's a great deal for the West because it just stops them from getting nuclear weapons. But what neoconservatives really hate is, we don't have an excuse to invade Iran anymore. So Trump getting rid of the deal, you see what Rouhani just said. He said we're going to start our nuclear enrichment again, probably. He said we'll wait a few weeks to discuss with our other allies, the other people in the deal, but we're going to start this again. And if Iran starts making a nuclear weapon, that's a perfect excuse for neoconservatives to invade Iran. And that is just really to the heart of it. Neoconservatives want to invade Iran. Bush wanted to do it, Dick Cheney wanted to do it, and now Bolton, Pompeo are making Trump want to do it as well, even though I really doubt Trump would actually want to do it. So overall, it's just really, really fucked up and annoying. Like, I can't even believe some of the stuff Trump does sometimes. He's such an idiot. And what I wanted to say as well is the US the most dangerous country in the world? And I would argue that it is, because I've seen a graph where I think it's France, the UK, and the US all think Iran is the most dangerous country in the world. And I really can't understand how. So it's a Middle Eastern country with ballistic missiles and a space program and quite a good army, but that is relatively it. Think of all the other countries who are way more advanced than them. Think of all the countries in Europe. Think of the Canadians, or even like other countries like Spain and Mexico and things like that. It's not the biggest threat to the world just because it hates the West. What about North Korea with its nuclear weapons? Iran doesn't have that. And to the heart of it really is Iran has massive oil reserves. That's another point of it, really, isn't it? So if neoconservatives get to invade Iran, they get access to the Persian Gulf's, oil reserves that Iran controls. And then it also, you've got to look into it more cynically, they're also doing the bidding of Israel and Saudi Arabia, because Iran is the main challenger to, Islamic supremacy by Saudi Arabia. And Israel obviously hates Iran for being very anti-Zionist, and let's face it, anti-Semitic as well. The last couple of leaders have denied the Holocaust, so it makes sense. But Israel does have its own secret nuclear program, and it's talking about how Iran, abiding by the laws of the deal, is going to somehow let them get a nuclear weapon, which makes absolutely no sense. It's ridiculous. And, are we going to go to war with Iran? And I hope the European countries stand up to the US, because war with Iran would be even worse than Iraq, because Iran actually still have a good army. By the time the UK and the US invaded Iraq, they had decimated Saddam Hussein's army in the first Gulf War and put massive sanctions on it, so he couldn't really rebuild it. Iran's army is actually relatively good for the Middle East, probably second only to Israel, but Israel is far more advanced, but it's way better than Saudi Arabia, Egypt, all these other countries. There's a way better military, and that has occurred through its isolation and everything, but still it works closely with North Korea to get better technology. Ballistic missile technology all comes from North Korea, submarine stuff, everything like that. So, Trump doing this, and what does that say to the North Koreans, that the US will go back on a deal 3 years later that is guaranteed, a regime to have its sanctions lifted? So Kim Jong-un looks at that saying, hang on a sec, the US said if Iran gave up its nuclear capabilities, they would lift the sanctions. But how can I trust them if 3 years later they've gone back on that deal and you're back to square one, basically? And that is, what the North Koreans are going to do. So it's stupid diplomacy. Like, why does Kim Jong-un want to make a deal with Trump now? He's just shown the US aren't to be trusted. And that's what I mean. US are the most dangerous country in the world. Think of all the world that they control, all the military bases they have in the Middle East, but they can't handle one country standing up to them. And they fucked over this country for about 50 years, and they're still doing it, and they can't handle it. And Trump, he might have this vendetta against Obama, but I don't understand how he's so stupid. I don't understand how anyone defends him. The people who will fight this war in Iran are going to be the sons and daughters of Trump voters. Where do you think all the soldiers come from? Do you think it comes from like upper class people in California and New York? No, they come from the Midwest and poor areas, and they're the people going to be dying for Trump's war. But they're all celebrating this, saying about how Obama's a secret Muslim who really wanted to help Iran. But if there's a war in Iran, you think Iraq is bad. What is it, like 5,000 US troops died in Iraq? And how many more wounded? Imagine going to a country that is way bigger and has a way bigger army as well, and a way more effective army, with allies in Syria and Russia and North Korea and China, if they wanted to help them. How many US troops do you think are going to die then? And I think this is all pointing to the US is going to collapse as the world hegemonic power soon. Like, Trump is the ugly face, but this corruption and awfulness that is the US empire, I think, it's slowly coming undone, and I think Trump has exposed this to everyone. The US only cares about one thing, really, and it's capitalism. And Iran stands in its way of complete dominance over the Middle East. And what does the Middle East have for them, which I'm so interested in? It's oil. And people say that the Iraq war wouldn't have happened if oil wasn't there. It wasn't just for oil, but it wouldn't have happened if oil wasn't there. And that's the same with Iran. If Iran was in the middle of nowhere, say Iran was where Kazakhstan was, or something like that, the US would not give a shit, really. And the US is also such a hypocrite when it comes to nuclear weapons. Pakistan and India have nuclear weapons. Pakistan, especially Islamic fundamentalism, is rife in Pakistan. Where did the Taliban come from? Pakistan. And you let them get nuclear weapons. And it's just all this bullshit that Trump was saying, that they violated the spirit of the deal and all this rubbish because they built more ballistic weapons. You're not the only country who's allowed to have ballistic weapons. It's absolutely ridiculous. So you've always had one time of voice. I'm just really pissed off about all of this shit. It's just so annoying. And, if you're a young person watching this a bit later, just if you're interested in politics, this is why our generation need to take over, because people like Trump is so stupid, and our generation, for the most part, are anti-Trump, anti-nationalist. So us taking over, we're better educated. Like, Trump is probably the dumbest president of all time. He is an absolute idiot. I can't even understand what the merits of putting out this deal was. Rex Tillerson, the ex-CEO of ExxonMobil, who was Trump's Secretary of State, was even for this deal. And he is obviously in bed with the oil lobby. What would the American oil companies love? An Iran regime that is pro-US. But he was still for this deal because he obviously saw what it was, keeping peace in the region. And, I said in my previous live stream, what will happen if Israel invades Iran preemptively and everyone in the region gets sucked into this war? And that could be the catalyst for World War III, which I was saying in the other video, like, what happens in Syria if Israel invades Iran? The Syrian army is on Iran's side. What happens to all these countries out on the side of Iran? Do they get involved? Does North Korea get involved? Does China get involved? Does Russia get involved? And people like John Bolton and Pompeo, like, these are the worst people for these jobs, and it's just so depressing. I'm so anti-US at this point. I was just watching a documentary called Bobby Kennedy for President. This guy was a politician in the 1960s, and he is 100%, I don't even know, 100 times maybe more progressive and sane than Trump. He was such a smart guy and such a smart politician, and he really connected with people, and he understood what they wanted, and he was anti-ridiculous wars like the Vietnam War. And this guy was around in 1960, well, he died in 1968. And the state of US politics, what Nixon started with the Southern strategy and the Republicans all switching over to be, the racist Democrats all switching over to be Republicans, has created this monster in Trump. And the fact that people like Don Blankenship, I think that's his name, and there's a neo-Nazi who's winning the Republican primary in polling at the moment. The state of the US is disgusting, but it's not surprising. It's a country built on the backs of slaves. You've never dealt with your race problems, so a monster like Trump can easily get in. And, you can blame it all on, like, the working class, white working class, I don't feel appreciated anymore. But it's bullshit. It's racism at its core, and the US has never dealt with its racism, and it still hasn't. People getting outraged about, what's that, Blue Lives Matter and all this shit, because cops are killing black people, and suddenly, black people don't respect the cops. Go figure. Of course they don't. So overall, yeah, I was saying this is a really, really dangerous thing that Trump's done. It threatens the world, obviously really, really badly, and we'll see what happens. Hopefully, what I hope is Iran will keep to the deal, but the UK, France, Russia will be the guarantors of it, and the US will become irrelevant in this respect. And that's what I hope. I want the US to be frozen out of it, because it's time for Iran to come back into the global community. Because why is Iran so much different from Saudi Arabia and Pakistan? It's not. It's because them two let the US have bases in their country, and Iran doesn't. And the US fucked over Iran for so long, they just got sick of it and got rid of them. And that's why Iran hates the US, and that's why the US hates Iran. It's absolutely ridiculous. And anyway, yeah, if you've watched this later, because I haven't had many viewers on this one, just let me know what you think in the comments. Do you think the US is the biggest danger to the world? If you are an American, what do you think of, what Trump is doing with Iran? I can't believe anyone would agree with this. Any sane person would agree with this. And yeah, if you've tuned in, cheers for watching, and hopefully I'll get a video maybe detailing it a bit more soon.